therefore humbly call on this honorable House to act now and protect the ordinary Ghanaian from the burden of excessive rent costs. Mr. Speaker, once again, I thank you for the opportunity to make this statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I will give the floor to Honorable Former Minister for Roads and Transport.
Thank you.
Roads and Highways.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important statement. And I want to commend my esteemed colleague for raising this issue of rent and its associated problems. Mr. Speaker, rent is a very important area that, as a country, we must all focus on and make sure that we provide shelter, especially for low-income Ghanaians. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the Rent Act, which was passed about 60 years ago, has outlived its usefulness. In fact, as a result of urbanization, population growth, and the huge housing deficit, my colleague mentioned that it's 2 million. In fact, it has moved down to 1.8 million. But it's still huge, Mr. Speaker. As a result, it has made the Rent Act and its implementation difficult. In fact, as housing minister, I come to this house to answer a lot of questions on the Rent Act. And many of the issues that my colleague raised have been answered in the proposal that I brought to Parliament. In fact, he did mention that in March 2003, a review of the Rent Act was brought to this August House. It has delayed unnecessarily, and I think when it comes to revision of acts and legislation, it is the responsibility of Parliament, as was espoused by Honorable Speaker Abang Babin. Is currently, I understand, at the ministry, and we call on the ministry to, as a matter of urgency, to bring back the rent bill so that Parliament, which is the body responsible for legislation, can do its job in shaping and bringing into place a new Rent Act that will address many of the issues that the member raised. In fact, he mentioned the need to move Rent Act department into an authority. The institutional aspect of the bill is highly recognized in the bill, and I expect that when it comes back, we will look at it thoroughly. The member also made a proposal for the introduction of rental advance scheme, assistant advance scheme. It will interest you to know that this is something that was started under the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia administration. In fact, it was launched and it's been piloted in 6 regions. As we speak, the member also made a proposal for the introduction of rental advance scheme, assistant advance scheme. It will interest you to know that this is something that was started under the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia administration. In fact, it was launched and it's been piloted in 6 regions. As we speak, I don't have the right figure available, but close to 3,000 beneficiaries have benefited so far from the rental assistance scheme. And in fact, during the vetting of the new minister, I had the opportunity to ask him what is it that he's going to do to upscale it. He said that he's going to speak to private institutions to raise capital to support it. That I think is a good idea. So.
Timely statement presented by our brother Honorable Edem Agbana on the challenges of rent. Mr. Speaker, the current rent regime and then the rent relationship between landlords and tenants is so inequitable that even as members of parliament, you will agree with me that one of the biggest challenges in our offices today is rent support. Mr. Speaker, if you come to my office in Medina, for example, even this morning before I left the office, there were people in the office asking for rent support. Many people have been unlawfully evicted from their homes. To review our Rent Act, we need to take urgent steps to review our Rent Act. Mr. Speaker, the current rent regime and then the rent relationship between landlords and tenants is so inequitable that even as members of parliament, you will agree with me that one of the biggest challenges in our offices today is rent support. Mr. Speaker, if you come to my office in Medina, for example, even this morning before I left the office, there were people in the office asking for rent support. Many people have been unlawfully evicted from their homes. So the issue of rent is a very serious one. Mr. Speaker, I believe that we must slowly but surely move away from this regime where every time you need some advance before you can have access to a rent. We can have regimes, as in other best practices, people could pay monthly, or it's so flexible for people to determine whether they can pay every 2 months or they can pay every 3 months. But this regime where you need a rent advance of 1 year or 2 years, and some of the rents are now dollarized, Mr. Speaker. If you don't have dollar, you can't even get rent in parts of Greater Accra region. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a very serious one. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind us of one of the major goals of our Constitution, which is enshrined in Article 17. Mr. Speaker, Article 17 is titled Social Objectives of our Constitution. And it says that the state shall endeavor, Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I read, the state shall endeavor to secure and protect a social order founded on the ideals and principles of freedom, equality, justice, probity, and accountability as enshrined in Chapter 5 of this Constitution. And in particular, the state shall direct its policies towards ensuring that every citizen has equality of rights, obligations, and opportunities before the law. Mr. Speaker, as we speak now, if you're in Ghana and you are poor, you don't have equal opportunities when they come to rent issues. Mr. Speaker, if you are in Ghana and you've just lost your job, you don't have any opportunity when it comes to rent. So, Mr. Speaker, I sincerely pray that, Mr. Speaker, you would order that this statement be referred to appropriate committee so that Parliament will do follow-up on this matter to ensure that the minister brings back the Rent Act into this house for us to amend same to secure equal opportunities for all, particularly the most vulnerable and the poor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the statement.
Thank you, Honorable Asama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let us appreciate the maker of the statement, Honorable Eric Edem Agbanya, Member of Parliament for the good people of K2 North. Mr. Speaker, if it hadn't been the intervention of the MPP government bringing in free secondary education, one of the major issues that members of parliament were faced with were two: support for tuition and support for rent. I'm happy to say that that of tuition has been taken away, and one of the major problems we are being faced now is rent support.
Honorable Asamoah, before the introduction of the free senior high school, were students paying tuition fee at secondary level?
Mr. Speaker, that support was
I always say that in contributing to statement, you need to be guided by the standing order.
Yes.
And we must be factual.
Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to generate an debate, but I want to please allow. I just want to express the fact that one of the major issues that we have to deal with is rent support from our constituents. It's not because they want to put that pressure on members of parliament. But Mr. Speaker, if we are to look at what the maker of the statement spoke about under recommendation, that is the 1,500 Ghana cedis averagely per a month to be paid by national service personnel that are likely to be paid 700 Ghana cedis doesn't align. So, Mr. Speaker, in our quest and effort to solve this issue, I believe working on the Rent Act alone might not suffice. But in addition, we have to have measures that can help improve on our credit system. Mr. Speaker, if property owners are supposed to give out their rooms for rent, they also want to be assured that they are going to get paid at the end of the month. So in addition to support our system, it will be good that what the previous government started to work on, which is the establishment of a good credit score system, so that property owners will be assured to give their rooms for rent, in order not to ask for people to pay 2 or 3 years advance so that they can be assured of their payment. Mr. Speaker, in addition to this, I believe that we may have to review how much we also do pay our national service personnel who are also supporting our workload. If you look at countries that are working on dual system, that national service is also a time that one has to learn to be part of the workforce. And it shouldn't be a time of punishment to our national service personnel. 1 year is quite a long time, and I believe if government can also take steps to review how much we pay our national service personnel, because if they are to pay 1,500 a month, 1,500 Ghana cedis a month, that means they will be in arrears every month to be able to survive, not to talk about their transportation and feeding. So whilst we are taking steps to look at rent issues, Mr. Speaker, my advice is that government should, as a matter of agency, review how much we are paying national service personnel to support them as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this particular statement. And I want to thank the maker of the statement. That, Mr. Speaker, this issue has come up, I think, just about the right time. We all know the cost of rent in this country and the housing deficit that we have in this country. That, Mr. Speaker, when you travel to most of our communities, essential service providers like teachers and nurses are reluctant to even accept posting to these communities, because when they get in there, to even get a place to rent so they can wake up in the morning and go to work, in itself is a problem. Apart from the cost
in the cities as the maker of the statement has enumerated. In the villages, the houses are simply not available. And so somebody, for example, is posted to a place like Likpebala in my constituency to go and teach or to go and serve as a health practitioner. The fellow has to stay in Howe, pick a motor in the morning before he gets to work. Mr. Speaker, oftentimes when you see them in the morning, they look like people coming from maybe a Galante pit as a result of the nature of the road. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we say we are building affordable houses, and the focus and the concentration is always in the towns and the cities, and no attention is paid to the rural areas, what it will create eventually is that everybody will want to move to the cities and towns where they believe they can get property. That will use workers' money to build an apartment, like the dentists need housing. Then people who are well placed in society will go and buy candidates of
President John Dramani Mahama, who promised
it for the poor people who cannot raise money to buy it. I think that it is not a healthy practice that we use state resources to build
uphold the laws and combat whilst the OS
and yet we sell it to the people who have money and then
abuses the law to target his political opponent.
Mr. Speaker, it's a practice that we need to check. One of the reasons why, Mr. Speaker, I believe that houses are becoming very expensive in this country.
Kenofurata or your former finance minister. And the landlord, and don't contribute anything to the state. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think that one of the reasons why we are not able to enforce the law, at 1963 at 24. Encourage the affected persons to come together and seek legal redress. Ladies and gentlemen, President Mohammed's administration is a growing disaster, particularly in the fight against corruption. As you know, the government established Oral Committee
For us, it looks like the committee was just set up as a political persecution mechanism. Why? I have a report in my hands. Now read it. The former Chief Executive Officer of Microfinance and Small Scale Center, Maslow, Sedinam Tamaklu Aduno, has been sentenced to serve 10-year prison with hard labor. The conviction stems from misappropriation of funds allocated for Maslow activities between 2013 and 2016. Over 17 million Ghana cedis, which was meant to be disbursed to victims of fire incident at Kantamanto, was misappropriated by the accused. A report that was presented to former President Mahama, and even the ones that we've seen circulating, I have not seen even a sentence or even a page talking about Sedinam Tamaklu, somebody or who misappropriated. He was a former CEO of Maslow. And for this person, the entire matter has gone through our court processes. The court made pronouncement. He's been sentenced to 10 years in prison. Yet, the oral committee whatsoever did not find it appropriate to tell Ghanaians where Sedinam Tamaklu is. Indeed, I'm even surprised that even yesterday when the Attorney General had the press conference, I was thinking, because this is a pending issue, this is some monies misappropriated, 70 million. I was thinking that the Attorney General will even mention it, that maybe they've been taking steps to make sure that Sedinam Tamaklu will be brought back to Ghana. She rather is a fugitive, not Mr. Ofori-Atta. She rather is a fugitive, not Mr. Ofori-Atta. President John Dramani Mahama has promised OCA instead of ORA. President Mahama now, according to Manasseh Azori, is the Republic's chief clearing agent. Ladies and gentlemen, President Mahama cannot shift the chief clearing agent tag to the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, Dr. Dominic Ayeni. Yesterday at the press conference, you saw how the Attorney General struggled to say that President Mahama did not direct him to file nolle prosequi and that he made a decision independently. I mean, this is bizarre. And for me, this is even more worrying. Such important matter. The minister tasked with the construction of 5,000 units of houses, $200 million involved. We did not get the 5,000 units. We rather got uncompleted 1,005 units. The said minister was in court, and the Attorney General entered into a nolle prosequi, and he's been appointed. You have a situation where there is a $66 million scandal hanging around the neck of the former Senate boss, Mr. Ernest Thompson. And instead of him to answer to Ghanaians through the court, again, the Attorney General entered into a nolle prosequi, cleaned this person, says, go home. And then you have a former deputy governor in charge of banking supervision, advancing a colossal amount of 400 million or so to a collapsing bank. And he's in court to answer. The Attorney General goes to court, picks this man up, clears him of all charges. Then the following day, interestingly, he is appointed governor, Bank of Ghana. So you ask yourself, President Mahama, so is it the case that you cannot get anybody at all to be governor, Bank of Ghana, and you must appoint somebody with a heap of cases around us, with so many issues around his neck? He is answering a case in court, a case involving over 400 million Ghana cedis or so. Now, Attorney General goes in, picks him up, clears him, then the following day he's appointed governor. Meanwhile, you are chasing after certain ghost document from ORA. And then you have Mr. Domlevot saying that even all the documents they have gathered, it must be audited before it can be credible. Can you imagine? You've been given a work to do, and then you present your report, and now you are telling us that even the work that you have done is not even correct. It's not even solid, and that we must audit it again. This is the kind of situation we find ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, the Attorney General can tell this story that the president wasn't aware. What kind of governance is that? That you drop such important cases in court, involving former ministers, involving somebody you intended to appoint the governor, Bank of Ghana. You made all of these decisions without the input of the president, and the president wasn't aware. Said this to some children by the fireside, but not to us. President Mahama appointed him and instructed him to clear the NDC members whilst taking steps to prosecute opponent using a certain discredited ORA. Even their chairman cannot even declare his asset.